If you've wanted yet feared to do work that is weird, this is the show you just need to hear, where it is revealed how people got into a field that very much appealed to them. You know, following your passion and all that. You know, blazing your own trail. They finished with success because they kept on trying each time they failed. Let's listen to them speak about their jobs, which are quite unique. Weird work.
If you own a castle on a secluded island, can you really expect to dress yourself? When you're cruising through the Mediterranean on a super yacht, do you imagine making your own shrimp cocktail? The world needs butlers. And today's guest, Paul Huizinga, trains the best of the best, the creme de la creme, the top dogs of the domestic arts. Paul holds court over the Internal Butler Academy, a sprawling 135-room classic, super rich person place in the Dutch region of Simpelveld, Netherlands. Graduates of the program go on to manage estates, hotels, super yachts, and many of the other frivolities of the rich and super duper rich. Paul's tale is a classic one. Man loses his job in finance during the global collapse of 2008. Then he pursues his lifelong passion of becoming a butler, and now runs the whole goddamn academy. It's weird work. Gone global, baby. A lot of people listening to this show have probably like two major cultural touchstones when it comes to butlers. Downton Abbey and Batman. Which of those two do you think is the most accurate for what the job of a butler is? And if you could tell me why you think it's Batman, that would be super helpful.
Well, I think Downton Abbey because I've never seen Batman.
You've never seen a Batman movie?
I've never seen Batman. Sorry. I only know Downton Abbey.
Oh, Paul, that's got one of the best butlers.
And you had in the past, you had upstairs, downstairs, the Bellamy family, and you know, all that kind of stuff. But that's for the oldies.
Yeah, well, as a side note, you should watch Batman. You'll love the butler. He beats the crap out of everybody. Oh, yeah. He's fantastic.
And I know the butler from that series, The Nanny.
Another great butler.
So there is a movie, it is called The Remains of the Day with Anthony Hopkins. And that's a wonderful movie as well. One of the best movies about this.
That's great. We'll have a butler movie recommendation afterwards.
Yeah.
So being a butler is like one of the oldest professions. And I was just wondering if you could just give me kind of like a quick History 101 on where the profession originated and where it came from.
Yeah, well, I won't say it's the oldest profession because that's something else. But you know, Joseph from the Bible, he was, I think, one of the first butlers because he was in charge of the wine of the Pharaoh. And then, you know, a butler was in the old days, he was the one who was in charge of, you know, the wine storage, etc. There's the word butler coming from. It is, you know, from French, it is bouteille. And bouteille means that is the bottle. And the bottle was diverted in English to, well, you know, butler. So as most people think that a butler is typically, well, British, as a matter of fact, it's not completely true. It's more French than English. And so let's say the butler that people nowadays know is more or less created by Hollywood. People think nowadays a butler was somebody who is only serving coffee and tea, etc. And okay, he did a little bit in housekeeping, receiving guests, opening the door and making funny remarks, and, you know, helping Mr. in his clothes and helping Mrs. out of her dress. But, that's not the real life of a butler. The butler has evolved from people from the village who needed a job.
That's really interesting because I think about that you mentioned that it's France, and I think it was like Louis XIV who kind of would have a whole bunch of staff at Versailles, but a lot of them were aristocrats.
Yeah.
And they
yeah.
were like aristocrats assigned to like a very specific thing. But you're saying it evolved from being like these tasks that were given to aristocrats,
Yeah.
Present Louis with this bottle, put his
Yeah.
clothes on or something like that, moving down to like regular, ordinary people taking those jobs.
Well, it was a big honor when you were allowed to assist with, the réveil. That was when he, woke up and when they gave him his underwear and etc., etc. For the noble people, and that was the only way that you counted, more or less, at court. You only counted when you had an apartment in Versailles. So let's say the nobles were not butlers, although they did more or less their task. Well, let's say footmen.
Yes.
The nobility at Versailles hardly had any money to pay a butler themselves.
Now, you're not like a professional butler now.
Yes.
Could you tell me a little bit more about what you do?
Well, I am not doing so much as a butler, to be honest, but if I would work as a butler, which I did in the past, because now I am one of the senior trainers at the butler school in the Netherlands, and I'm doing the recruitment for international clients who are looking for staff. So I help them to find staff. But when I worked for a family, I was the only staff member.
Mm-hmm.
That means I was the maid, I was the cleaning lady, I was the valet, I was the chauffeur, I was the chef, I was and now and then I was the butler as well, who received the guests.
And when you worked at this family, like how rich were they? When you were the sole butler, it's like, are they like estates, multiple places, billions status, or are they like upper middle class?
No, they had a nice house in the middle of The Hague, nearby all the embassies. They had a house at Ibiza. To give an idea of the size of the house, I had my own apartment in the house. So I had my own hall, I had my own living room, my own kitchen, my own sleeping room, and that was all in the house itself. So you can imagine how much work I had to clean the whole thing.
That's a lot.
But that was my situation. It varies a lot from being the only staff member until maybe in charge of let's say 1,000 staff members in the house.
Damn.
Those houses do exist, yes.
Wow. And you did a lot of different tasks, you said. Cleaning, gardening, like driving people. For you personally, what did you like to do? What was your favorite?
Well, let's say driving Madam to her appointments, because you never knew how long that would take. And then often she gave me some money to have a nice dinner somewhere. And I had to be back on time. Yeah, what I experienced as very nice is when we had guests and who were, with us for dinner. But if those guests were sitting in the kitchen in, jeans, in a polo, having dinner at the kitchen table, and often those guests were not the least. I had once the ambassador of the United States, of Israel, of Brazil, and a lot of friends of them sitting at my kitchen table, and I was serving them from the stove. So not official, formal, but just, do you want to have some more? Okay, I put something on your plate. And those are the things that I think not so many people can tell what they experienced. And those are the nice things to remember.
Do you end up cooking a lot for people as part of the job?
Well, the funny thing is, I was a banker before I started as a butler. So I never was a chef. I can cook fairly well. I know how to keep a family alive. But that doesn't mean that I am a 5-star chef. So we had a very, very nice caterer. We had some very nice shops where they sell exquisite food. And I know how to prepare a plate, how to put some things on it so it looks nice. For instance, what I just told when I had all those diplomats at my kitchen table, they all thought that I was a perfect chef, but I just did this stuff in the pans. Well, let's say throw some food on your chef jacket, some on the stove, and everybody thinks that you made it, and that's terrific.
That's great. So I want to talk a little bit more about your kind of current position and the Butler School.
The International Butler Academy in the Netherlands. Mostly when people start any butler school, when they die, it's the end of the school.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, the founder, Mr. Winnekes, he started the school in 1999 and he opened the doors in the year 2000. And when he retired, he sold the school to a partner of him. And so the school still exists. That makes it the oldest butler school in the world, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And if you could just describe, like, I've seen pictures of it physically, but I would love to hear from you how you would describe the school and maybe like walking into it for the first time.
Well, when I got without, a job, that was in a period of all those bank crises, etc. So I didn't know what to do, and then I decided, well, to follow my heart and, well, let my dream come true. And so I went to this school for a day to join and look how it is. And I said, yeah, that's what I should have done years and years ago. So the first time I walked in, I was really, oh my God, they are all wearing black, and they're all, oh my God, how fancy it is. Sitting at a long, lunch table, and the founder and his wife at the head of the table, and the teacher and some other staff members. I thought, oh, holy moly, that's the Downton Abbey style. And I like it very much.
Yeah, because you've been in fancy environments if you're in finance. Was this like next level fancy?
Well, let's say I know now why it is a fancy environment. That is because, you could also train students in a room of a hotel or, whatever. That's not that difficult. But we decided to have kind of an estate-like house. We have a big house now. It was, well, a former monastery, 7,000 square meters, 135 rooms. Why? That's to avoid that students in their first job come into a house like that and are walking around with their mouth open and only looking up to all those chandeliers and be impressed by the wealth that you find in such houses.
So are you saying that like the school being in this beautiful, large mansion
Yes.
is not just like a pleasant experience, but it also helps prepare students for the moment when they go to a really rich, super wealthy person's home? They're not like, like, look at that. Totally blown away.
Yes. It's not only because it is nice, but it's part of the whole training.
And speaking of the training, is becoming a butler like a single path? Like, okay, you become a butler, or are there a variety of different butler courses a person could train in?
Well, it is important to realize that the butler of the 21st century is not a servant anymore. Yeah, let's say not completely a servant anymore. You are a manager, an executive manager of a big estate, of a mansion, and not one, but scattered all over the world. They have more mansions. Maybe you are even in charge of the yacht and etc. So we also train our butlers to realize that they are not the old school servants, but they are managers.
And what are some of the other skills that you train at the school besides management?
Well, we train a whole lot from how to tie, a bow tie for your boss, because maybe he is not able to do it himself, so you have to stand in front of him and do it. From ironing. Oh, I remember the first time I ironed my ladies' underwear. I was very much afraid that it would glue to my iron. But okay, but that's what you learn them as well. How to receive guests, how to make the beds, how to serve in the formal way, how to lay the table, how to make decorations, how to polish shoes. be aware of, safety. Don't bring, the children every day to school in the same way, but use other routes to bring them because, there are always people who will try, to kidnap them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a crazy one. I didn't even think about that one.
Yeah. Well, that's just how it is. But also manage the staff, how to hire staff, how to fire staff, how to treat staff, how to make schedules, working schedules, etc.
So one thing I wonder is like, I know I'm not that good at ironing.
Yeah.
But I feel like if I had to iron, like, okay, I could probably figure out, is there anything that people come into the school going like, yeah, this shouldn't be a problem for me. I'm good at this. Like, I'm good at making my bed. And you're like, no, you've been doing it wrong and terrible.
Yes. We always say, if you survive him, our CEO, Mr. Wennekes, you will survive every principal in the world. We train the students, they are 24 hours in a day. We train them about 16 hours per day. That is including lunch, dinner, also dinner is part of the training. And I hope now I'm going to offend a lot of people from the US, but I'm afraid that a lot of people from the US don't know how to handle a fork and a knife exactly in the way it should. So even work dinner is a way of, training our students. The same counts for lunch. So our lessons go on all day. We train them about 6 days per week, train them in how to be humble. As we say, when they walk in, we say, just forget that you just paid a lot of money for a course, that you are a student, forget it. From now on, you are one of the butlers of this family.
So in the US, we have like, this is sort of an aside, but like, if you join the military or something like that, and you're going to get in a group like the Marines, a certain group make it in. Not everybody makes it through the training.
Yeah.
It's brutal. It's tough. It's all the time.
Yeah.
How do people generally make it through the entire program, or are there a lot of people that drop out during it?
Well, if you pay a lot of money, you are not saying goodbye so fast. Because then you end up without any no diploma. We have our percentage of people who get their diploma is, I think, 96%.
Okay.
That's quite high. Let's say bricklayer can become a better butler, but than a doctor.
Okay.
Although, the doctor has has more knowledge about, a lot of things, have learned so much more. Doesn't mean that he has, the right DNA to be a butler. So it all depends on the person itself.
And what do you think that is? What do you think it's like that right thing that makes you a really good butler?
Well, you need to have it in your blood to be a butler. You need to be a person who likes to, be there for other people, to set aside your own interest for somebody else. If you can't be a butler. Then I always say, just find a nice job in a hotel or whatever. I would say make podcasts, but then probably you will not be a butler. Then you don't have that, don't have it in your blood.
Do you think you can tell when people like, when they walk in, you're like, they're not making it? You know what I mean?
No, that's impossible. We once had a person coming in, we thought, oh God, he'll never be a butler. He was a lot of tattoos and, his shirt open until his stomach, and all that hair coming out with a big silver chain around his neck.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Not a butler. He ended up in his course as the best student we ever had.
Huh?
Yeah. We had once a student who ended up as the number one. He was a former Navy SEAL. If that's tough or not, I don't know, but that's really tough. A Navy SEAL, they get, training in waterboarding or whatever. He ended up as the number one. And with tears in his eyes, he said, and that's true, with tears in his eyes, he said, this is about the most difficult and hard course I ever had in my life.
Wow.
Why I always say I'm a kind of Navy SEAL myself now. So
so through this brutal training, people actually pay money to go through it.
Yes.
First question, how much is tuition? How much does it cost to go through this program, and how long is the program?
I think it's about, let's say, approximately cost you 15,000 euros. Well, 10 weeks. That's it. But there are no extra costs involved. The only thing you have to pay yourself is in your spare time off. If you go to any restaurant, you have to pay it yourself. And
It doesn't sound like anybody has any free time during this course. It sounds pretty brutal.
that's sometimes true. When you have it all, they still have the homework to do. And
Yeah, so it's
tell
still
you
a
that
lot.
a whole load of homework they have to do as well. If you work as a butler, don't forget you don't have a work week of 40 hours. You mostly have a work week of about 60 hours. And you have to be very flexible. When I worked, I knew my starting time was in the morning it was at 8 o'clock. But it could be that the lady came down from upstairs at about, let's say 10, 11 o'clock and said, "Oh, Paul, I completely forgot I have an appointment. You have to bring me." So you jump in the car, put it in front of the house, put her coffee in it, put her lipstick in your own pocket because she always lost her lipstick. And then you bring her somewhere. And then sometimes you were happy that at 1:30 in the middle of the night, you went home again and still know that you didn't make her bed. So in the few minutes that you came home and she wanted to go to bed, you still have to make her bed as well.
And then how much money do you make as a butler?
Well, people think, oh, I'm going to be a butler, so I will have, let's say top salary. That's not true.
What's top salary?
It depends a bit on where you're working, on the country, your experience, your age. Let's say that you start with an average salary of, let's say, a bookkeeper, but you work a whole lot more hours. But a bookkeeper can probably earn more money, let's say through the years. But I think that goes with, a good butler goes a bit faster. Let's say that in the US, you can have an income of 60 or, let's say 70K per year, including health insurance, etc. But that's the salary for where you start. It goes in the US, it goes easily up to above, let's say 100K.
And then generally, do butlers pay expenses, or are all expenses kind of covered, like food, lodging, things like that? Are most of those covered and it's just 70K to 100K of just like income?
Well, depends on your contract. If you have a live-in position, then probably you don't have to pay anything for housing or food. If you live out, you have your own house, then you have to pay it yourself, of course. I think 60% have a live-in position. And sometimes you work so hard that you don't have even time to spend your money. Well, the best paid butler in the world earns about 1.5 million per year. But in his contract is that he is not allowed to have his own private life.
Oh, is that a real person?
Yeah, so he has no time to spend money. I think he's doing that already quite a couple of years. So I think
he makes $500,000 a year?
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's the exception. All listeners to the podcast, don't think you go to the International Butler Academy in the Netherlands and in 10 weeks' time you have a marvelous job where you earn about 1 million per year. Forget it. That's not the case.
That's fine. But I mean, it's still like, this is amazing because in the United States, like college is, 4-year college, $80,000, like per a year and things like that. You're talking about outrageously expensive, and it's making roughly the same amount as a butler after a 10-week program.
Yeah, but you have to do a whole lot of things, You are the one who is doing in the morning the loo of the Lord, even when he was sick in the middle of the night. So because when he wakes up, he expects his toilet to be clean.
Mm-hmm.
So you are doing his toilet.
True.
Yeah, and you have to make his breakfast and all this.
So I'd like to switch gears a little bit and get more into kind of your own personal story.
Yeah.
Now, potentially an appropriate question, but if you don't mind me asking, how old are you now?
I'm 64.
You look great.
Oh, thank you.
So you were in finance and then decided to make a switch to becoming a butler. Why?
Well, my decision was based on the circumstances. I was 21 years old when I started working in the bank, so I worked my way up. I ended up as a manager of a department of about 40 people. And then in, I think, 2008, the banking crisis all over the whole world. And after 2 years, my job did not exist anymore. Then I was about 54 years old, and then I had a year of a break. I didn't do anything. And then my wife came and she said, well, my wife and I, we know each other already since we were 16. So she knows a lot about me. And she said, well, you always had your dream that was butlering. And so why are you not going to do that? And I said, well, realize that it involves a lot. I'll be away from home mostly, at least in the week, only be at home in the weekends. And, well, we have children, we have grandchildren. And still, I went to that school and it was a warm bath for me being in that school. And then I decided to do that course myself. And I think it was one of the best, decisions I ever made because it changed my life. It changed my way of thinking, my way of looking at the world. And what I always say is both jobs start with a B, banker or butler. At a bank, we were there for our clients. But being a butler, I was there again for my clients. And that's what I think my core, I won't say my core business, but what my core feeling is when you work.
What about your perspective changed? You mentioned that it changed a lot about your perspective going into the job of being a butler. And I wonder what specifically kind of felt like an eye-opening shift for you.
An eye-opener for me was that if you ask a poor boy at a garbage belt somewhere in a poor country what it would mean for him to be rich, and he says, well, that is my own radio. If I have my own radio, then I would feel rich. That's an eye-opener to see for, what is wealth? What is it, as a matter of fact, being rich? And in that perspective, it has changed my life. But that's personally.
So on the other side of that, I want to get to kind of a larger idea I've been struggling with the butler role. It's like we're living in this time of extreme wealth disparity, especially here in the US, but also all around the world. I guess, do you feel like there's this weird sort of push and pull between like, wow, do we really want to be living in a world where there's such extreme wealth disparity that like butlers is a growing profession? Or is this a good thing for society?
Well, let's say, as I said before, there are houses where they have where you might be in charge of 1,000 staff members. Is that a kind of, let's say, slavery? That's not something I would like to discuss. But on the other hand, there are 1,000 people who have a job, have an income, and about another 1,000 and maybe another 1,000 people are living from that income, which they otherwise shouldn't have. So that's the other side of the medal. But let's say you don't earn money by doing your own housekeeping. It's very handy if you have somebody in the house who is doing your housekeeping. Then you can focus on your core business, on what you are good in. And and then the money flows for a little bit from the rich people to you. And then you have a job. You are the most intimate staff member. I have seen my ladyship as, I think, probably the only one next to her own husband in her underwear and without makeup. And so let's say you must also trust your butler that he will keep that confidential, what he sees. And that's very intimate between you and your staff member, to be trusted in that way.
I think that is interesting to think about with the wealth disparity and to your own story about like cooking dinner casually for diplomats is that These people feel so removed from normal society.
Yeah.
But in this butler role, you have this really interesting exposure to
Yeah.
this echelon of society. And it sounds like they're very normal interactions.
Yeah.
In some ways, like casually having dinner around next to the stove is like a very normal thing, even though these people are ambassadors and super wealthy and all this other stuff. You, as the butler, get exposure to a group that most people would never get to see.
No, they want to be in a normal position in their own time as well. And they need somebody around them who respects that and who can deal with that.
This was wonderful to talk to you, Paul. Where can people learn more about the International Butler Academy?
At www.butlerschool.com. If you're ever in the Netherlands, come by and have a cup of coffee with us.
Oh my God, I would love to be served a cup of coffee at the Butler School. That would be fantastic. I feel like I wouldn't fit in very well. I think I need to dress a little bit better and get my shit together.
Well, I wasn't working always in a suit as well,
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time.
It was a great pleasure for me speaking to you, and I hope really that this podcast will also inspire other people to follow their heart, and that's the dream come true. And I think that's the best thing you can do in your life. Follow your heart.
This week's episode of Weird Work was produced by the wonderful, indomitable, understated Matthew Brown. Weird Work was driven entirely by me, Sam Balter. My motivation and passion carried us through, and Matt was a supporting figure in the whole thing. We'd like to, just say if you like the show, subscribe to it, tell everybody about it, scream it from the rooftops, go onto the estate of a super rich person and throw a brick through their window with a little piece of note on it that says, Weird Work, the podcast, and see how that goes. And instead of funneling your hard-earned money back to rich people, give it to us instead. In return, we'll give you a hat or a shirt. That's right, buy our merch over at weird.work. That's the website. Okay, stay weird, you pinky-raising crumpet eaters. Yeah, I don't know how you would do this if I wasn't so good at it.